Good morning, everybody. Today is Daf Samach Zayin, Sechus Yevamos. We got to the Mishnah, around 10 lines from the top. Is there a Yiga? Anybody else? All right, and away we go. Bas Yisrael Shenises Lakoin Umes Veinicha Muberes. Samach Zayin Amud Mishnah. A Bas Yisrael, a non-member, Bas Yisrael is referring to a non-Kohen girl, that she was married to a Kohen and he died.
This could be the Marine.
And she was pregnant when he died. Now she has other kids, even if she has other kids. So normally, now we discussed last time about Avdei Nichse Tona Barzel. Avdei Nichse Tona Barzel basically belonged to the husband, right? And Nichse Malug, or the Avdei Malug, belongs to her, right? Because they're going up or down, right, is on her. So therefore, those who are Tona Barzel, so they belong to the father. The father, when he dies, it goes to his children, to his sons. So if she is left pregnant, then, the fetus is a partial owner in these avadim, and lo yochel avda b'truma mipnei chelko shuber. The avadim cannot eat truma. The avadim of this kohen, right? Because since they basically are owned by a fetus. We'll soon see a fetus does not feed. A fetus does not feed. In other words, because of a child is unborn, he is not allowed to go ahead and be Michael Truma to his avadim. Why? Because the fetus it passels. In other words, it would pass in a case of, let's say, she was a Bas Kohen. In another case, she was a Bas Kohen and he was a Yisrael. So her husband died. She said, okay, I can go back to my father's house as a Kohen. That doesn't work because the Uber prevents her from going back to her father's house and eating Truma there if her husband was a Yisrael. And also, cannot be Michael. If the fetus is going to be the one inheriting the avadim, then a fetus cannot allow its servants, because it's not a live person yet, to eat truma. That's opinion of Rabbi Yossi, and we're going to see that throughout the blat or an amud and a half of Rabbi Yossi's shita, that an uber cannot be Michael. Amrulo well, wait. Now that you told us halacha, there's a special halacha that if the fetus is destined to go ahead and inherit these Avdei Tona Barzel, and therefore they cannot go ahead and eat Truma because a fetus cannot allow one to eat Truma. So why did you just teach a case of a Bas Yisrael who was married to a Kohen? Af Bas Kohen the Kohen. Even if she was the daughter of a Kohen and her husband was a Kohen, so either way, it's not like we're talking about going back to her father's house. We're talking about the fact that they're going to be inherited by a fetus, and therefore a fetus cannot be Michael. So even in that case, because I should not allow them. Excuse me, I was waiting for that, right? But that was not allow them to go ahead and eat truma because the fetus is basically a partner or going to be the rightful owner of the avadim, and a fetus, he's not a Kohen yet, so therefore he cannot go ahead and be Michael. Fine. Speaking of which, the fetus cannot feed. Why is that? Zok the Gemara. Iboilu. Tam der Rabbi Yossi Mishum L'Ksaver Uber b'mei zara zaru is the reason why we say that the Uber cannot go ahead and feed them, is because while he's still a fetus, he basically still is like the mother. The mother was a Bas Yisrael, and therefore he's still considered to be a non-Kohen until he's born, right? Only his father was a Kohen, so he's not a Kohen yet. You're only a Kohen when you get born, and therefore that's the reason why the Avadim, who he's supposed to go ahead and inherit, cannot feed them. Oh, Dilma, or maybe he's a special halacha, Yulad Machil Shena Yulad Ena Machil. Only once you're born, then you can go ahead and your servants can eat truma on your behalf. But if you're not born yet, i.e., you're just a fetus, right? Then the avadim cannot eat on your behalf.
Wait. The Kohen acquired the servants when he married.
Correct. They were Avdei. We're talking about Avdei Tona Barzel. Correct.
Okay.
All right.
So they would have been able to eat anyway.
While he was alive.
While he was alive.
But he died. He died.
Oh, he died.
He died.
So that now they discontinued.
So since, even if there's other boys, even if he has other boys, but there's a fetus, since the fetus is a partner in these avadim, the halach is that an uber cannot be meichel. The fetus cannot, because he is there, they cannot feed because he hasn't been born yet. So we want to know what's the reason. Is it because he's not a Kohen yet? Or is it because we have a special halacha that an uber cannot basically acquire or other, he cannot fully possess these avadim, therefore they can't eat on his behalf. So Gemara says, Lamayin aftamina. So Gemara says simply, uber may kohenes. Well, let's say she was a kohenes married to the Kohen. Because if she's a kohenes, and if the halacha is that a fetus is just like the mother, so if the mother was also a kohenes, so either way, the uber is a kohen, and therefore the avadim should be able to go ahead and eat. So my Rabba Hainu Tamat Rabbi Yossi Ksavar Uber Zara Zaru. No, because we say that a fetus, as long as it's in the mother, so therefore it's considered to be like the mother. If the mother was a Yisrael, and therefore they would not be able to be truma. But it comes out according to this: if the mother was a kohenes, a bas kohen, then they would be able to go ahead and eat because he's a kohen even as a fetus.
Now, if the fetus turns out to be a girl,
we'll get there. Good question. We'll get there. Let's see. So Rav Yosef says, very good. So the Rav Yosef, no, Yula Michael, Shena Yula Rena Michael, no, different. The fetus, even if there's other people, since he's going to be a 20% partner of his other 4 boys, so therefore the halacha that a fetus cannot allow other seed on his behalf, but only one which was born is able to go ahead and have his servants eat truma on his behalf. So the fact the Gemara Meisvei Asukasha similar Bryce to our Mishnah. Amrlo Rabbi Yossi said Rabbi Yossi Mechasha Yenulano Al Bas Yisrael Kohen. Now that you told us that a Bas Yisrael was pregnant and she was married to a Kohen and he died, that the fetus is Eina Michael the Avadim. So Bas Kohen the Kohen Mahu. So what's halacha from a Kohen to Kohen, right? So Amr Lahem Zu Shemati V'Zulo Shemati. So he says no. In the case of Bas Yisrael to a Kohen, I heard that case. The halacha in that case is that Eina Michael. But the other case, and I was Bas Kohen the Kohen, I heard they could be Michael. The fetus, they could eat on the fetus's behalf. So what do you see over here? That you see over here, according to this, right, that the svara is that because the fetus was a zar, but if the mother is a kohenes, right, i.e. a Bas Kohen, then they will be able to eat. So if you say that the svara is like we just said, that because the fetus has the same identity as the mother until he's born, and therefore if she was a Bas Kohen, then the Avadim would be able to eat, and she was a Bas Yisrael, then the Avadim would not be able to eat. So it makes sense. Eli Amarta, Yulad Michael, Shena Yulad Ein Michael, Maiso Shamati Zolo Shamati. Right, but if you say that no, there's a special halacha that a fetus cannot feed other avadim cannot eat on behalf of a fetus, what does it make a difference if she's a Bas Kohen, a Bas Yisrael? Either way, it's a fetus, right? Same halacha, right? This is the case. It should be the case. So the Gemara says kasha, yeah, and you're right. It's a kasha on those who say that the reason is because the fetus is just like they have to go up to the mother. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Bar Shmuel, Zo divrei Rabbi Yossi. This is all the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Now, Rabbi Yossi says, even if she already has 4 other boys and she's pregnant, so the reason is since the fetus could be a 20% partner in the Avadim, so therefore it's like they're 20% owned by a non-Kohen, and therefore they cannot go ahead and eat Truma. So in this case, if there's, so the argue to say no. Even if the percentage is that yesh lo banim, we'll soon see why oichem shabanim, then they can eat because of the kids, because of the other boys. We'll say, doesn't the fetus own it? That's okay. So the fetus will get other property, and they won't get the chelik of these avodim. Ein lo banim. If there's no son, so eichlim mishum achim, then the nichsei, so the avdei sona barzel can go ahead and eat because of the brothers, because the brothers inherit their brother. And ein lo achim, if there's no brothers, then the entire mishpacha, because they're all kohanim, so therefore they have to have. So we say so what we see in this case that this is zo divrei Rabbi Yossi. So it sounds like right that Shmuel agrees. So he says no. So no, he says no. He says yeah, this is the case. No, this is what Rabbi Yossi says, but I don't agree. I Homer Le Shmuel Rav Chana Begata Puk I see. Sorry, he says, go ahead and bring me 10 people. The Ema Lucha Ban Payu, and I should tell them Hamazaka Uber Kana, right? And I want to say halacha that one who wants to go ahead and give over possessions to a fetus, right, to an unborn child, right, who's still his mother, he can acquire it. So if he can acquire it, so then the Uber is now a partner in the Avadim. If the Uber is a partner in the Avadim, then they shouldn't be able to go ahead and eat. So why is that? Okay, it must be that Shmuel agreed. It must be that Shmuel did agree with Rabbi Yossi. Umay kamash malan. So what kind of teach is the pligi Rabbanah the Rabbi Yossi? Right? What kind of teach the Rabbanah argue Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi Yossi says that the fetus is going to be a partner, then they can't eat truma. But if the Chami argues says no, he's not a partner. Umi pligi, right? My question is the pligi Rabbanah the Rabbi Yossi. Umi pligi. I think take it away. Umi pligi. I just want to see the aleph for a second. Right? Umi pligi. It takes out the word mesit. Right? I've Tanya. Ba'omar. Excuse me. I've Ba'omar. Rabbi Zakkai, so he says, right? This is a testimony that Rabbi Yossi heard, right? Word from word that was passed out from Shemai V'Avtalyon, V'hodulo, and they agreed. So, right? So he said, and they admitted that this is what that he said. So he held like Shemai V'Avtalyon. What was it?
He was that old Rabbi Yossi that he.
No. So it was brought down that there was a Masorah. I actually saw a footnote on that. Somewhere.
The thing I'm looking at says heard from him.
What number is that? I was seeing last night. 35. He says, right, could I have heard this directly from the mouths of Shemai and Naphtali as they lived before his time? Rather, he testified to which he heard in their names. Right. So he says, Shemai and Naphtali, they admitted, so they're all together. So Ravashi, Miktani, Vikiblu, who says they agreed with they were Makabel. V'hodulo, in other words, they heard that right? They heard that opinion, but they said never that Rabbi Yossi's was, his opinion was more logical that the fetus does acquire with, and therefore, even though they argued, but they said the other reason is more logical. So Taner Rabbanan, Heiniach. Now we're gonna have a brisa. We're gonna explain the parts. Heiniach banim, elu ve'elu eichlim. So if the Kohen, right, was married to a Bas Yisrael and he died, so if they're a banim, so elu ve'elu eichlim, all types of servants can go ahead and eat trua. Not only hers, right, because she can eat because of her boys, because she has existing children, right? So too, the Nichsei Tona Barzal, because they're owned by the father who's since or the husband who's since deceased, and therefore they can go ahead and eat truma. Henicha muberes, if he leaves her pregnant, right, and just pregnant, elu ve'elu ein eichlin, right? Neither one can eat, right? She can't eat yet because he's not the baby's not born. And therefore, her servants can't eat because she can't eat. And also, even if it's also the ones owned by the father can't eat because they're not alive yet. Now, if they left over children and she was pregnant, right, or boys and she was pregnant. So Avdei Malug Oichlin Kadeshi Yocheles. The Avdei Malug, since she's eating, because she has sons there and she has sons there, therefore she's basically still part of the Kohen family and she can eat Truma, so too she can eat, and so too her Avadim, her Avdei Malug can go ahead and eat. So Avdei Malug Oichlin Kadeshi Yocheles. Avdei Tona Barza Lo Yochlu Mipnei Chelko Sheuber. The Avdei Tona Barza, his cannot eat, even though there's Banim there. Nevertheless, since part of the portion is going to go over to the fetus, they can't go ahead and eat anymore. Because the Uber is Pasels Veina Machal Divi Rabbi Yossi. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. And Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yossi, the name of of Rabbi Yossi, Habas Ma'acheles Habein Eino Machal. A daughter goes ahead and can feed on her behalf, but not a son. We'll soon have to understand what this means. Wow. The Gemara is going to explain what this means. Now, Rav Shimon Chaya, Zecharim. So he says, no, Zecharim, if there's any male children. So he says, Rav Shimon Chaya, Zecharim Yeichlu. All of them go ahead and eat, right? If there's boys, right? And the Kevos, Lo Yeichlu. But the Kevos cannot go ahead and feed. Why? Shemi matzeh uber zachar ve'ein lebanos b'makom haben klum. Because if there's daughters, so you say, oh, the avadim belong to the daughters can eat truma, so too the servants do. But no, if it's a boy, because she's only pregnant, we don't know the gender. If it's a boy, then it turns out that the boy inherits it all. So therefore, all the avadim belong to the fetus. The fetus is Eina Meichel.
Wait, but there are other children.
But they're girls.
They're all girls.
Oh, they're all.
So they would go to him. So Gemara says, wait, time out. My Arya, we go to, all right, so he says, my Arya, Hashem Yamatzah Ubezachar, typically in the Nekeva, Nami Pasla, right? Even if it was in a Nekeva, right, it would also passel them from eating, right? Because it's the fetus is a partner. So Chad of Yoid Kamar. So it says, no, this is not the other. Chad, first of all, the Nekeva, Nami Pasla. First of all, if it was a girl, also possible. And furthermore, Shem Matzah Ubezachar, Vein Labadas B'Makom Ben Klum. And if there's girls and one boy, then the girls don't get anything. It all goes to the boy. Zacharam yeichlu. Wait, you said that if there's male boys, they go ahead and eat. Iva ika uber, but the uber is a partner in the chelak of the avadim of the son of Barzil, right? Va'ika uber. So ksaver ein chayshin l'miuta, right? So this is Eddie's point there before. We're not chayshin l'miut, right? What's the issue here? Remember, it's an uber. If we say over here that there's boys, right? So why do the boys, isn't there a fetus who's perhaps going to be a boy, right? And therefore they shouldn't be able to eat because he has a portion of Adam. So say, no. Now a woman, right, she's pregnant. So there's an outcome is basically boy or girl, right? So 50-50. However, there's also a chance of a miscarriage. So let's say it's a 2% miscarriage chance, right? So 2%, if there's other boys, and she miscarries, so there was no fetus because the baby died, and therefore the existing boys get in the quantity the entire time. Also, if it's a girl, right? If it's a girl, right? So a girl, we said, is 49% chance because 2% is, for miscarriage, and it leaves over 98%, 49. So it turns out that the only result of the slaves having an issue is if she gives birth to a boy, because then the fetus would have been a partner in the avadim. But that's only a 49% chance, right? Because 50-50 minus the chance of a miscarriage. So therefore, so therefore, if there's legal boys, for the 49% chance, it's going to be a boy since it's a minority. The boys say, maybe we are it could be boy. However, but there's a takana that we do, right? Rav Nachman Shmuel was he say, if you have orphans going ahead and to divide the estate of their father, right? They have an appointee from the court who go ahead and look after the assets and make sure they get a fair market deal for all the items. They get the nicest portion they can get on their behalf. Once they get all then they go ahead and trade or push it off. And Rav Nachman Didei Omar Hegdilu and Rav Nachman himself says no. Whatever the Apichopis goes ahead and decides to them, you get this and you get this, then they have to stick that. Because if you don't say that, my koch beis din yafa, right? Then what's the good of the power of the beis din, right? So what do you see over here? We see over here that beis din can go ahead and split up the assets of the father. So what can you say? You say even if it's a boy, beis din can say all these avadim are owned by the existing child. There's another child. Okay, so he's going to get the barn, or he's going to get something else. So he's able to divide it. That not everybody has, 20% in every single asset. Rather, you get 100% of this, and you get 100% of this, and you get 40% of this. So therefore, we're not worried that the fetus is a part owner. And since the fetus is not a part owner, the sons who are alive are the part owner. Since they're kohanim, therefore they're servants of the Avdei Tzona Barzel, can also eat truma just like their masters, either which are the 13-year-old boys or whatever they are, 10-year-old boys or whatever they are. They're kohanim. They can go ahead and feed them. So Lema Rav Nachman Tanahi. Let's say it's a machlekes that which Rav Nachman says is a machlekes tonight in terms of whether they inherit or not. So tonight, so lo the Kuli Ami Slu the Rav Nachman. Really, no, everyone agrees with Rav Nachman. And they're only arguing as to whether. So everyone holds that they can divide it. But the question is, if you're chayshish for the miyut, right, then you got to be concerned, or if you're not. And Rabbi Shua Rabbi Yossi Aimer Mishum Aviv. So he said, oh. I was thinking of the case of it. Rabbi Shua Rabbi Yossi Aimer Mishum Aviv. So Rabbi Shua the son of Rabbi Yossi said the name of his father, i.e. Rabbi Yossi. Habas Michael, Haben Ein Michael.
Wow, it's just a basic.
So we said this earlier. So we said this before. Right. So the daughter, if there's a daughter left over, right, then they can eat truma, but the ben does not. So Maishna ben deloy machil mishum chelko shuber. So basnami loy techem mishum uber. So even if there's a daughter, also if there's an uber, right, there's a fetus, then maybe the fetus will inherit it, and therefore you can't even have the inherit. So Rabbaye hachamay skinan. We're talking about where there's a small amount of assets. Now, normally the halacha is that a nice estate goes to the sons.
No,
but there's no way at all, right? But over here, if there's we're talking about a case of sons and daughters. But if he has a meager estate, so then we're worried that the daughters are going to starve, the young girls are going to starve. So therefore, it's a takana that if it's a small estate, the girls get it, not the boys. The boys, okay, go fend for yourselves. Or you're 8 years old, you're strong, go ahead and work in the field, right? The girls, right, they are stuck, right? So therefore, if it's a meager estate, the girls actually inherit and not the boys. So therefore, it's the girls who are alive. The daughters are the ones who are able to feed the avadim, right? And not because of the sons. So Mishum Chalgosh, so Grazes, right? Some Manashach, right? Sei Haida Avrabenhu, and therefore if she's pregnant, because if her daughters is good. Why? Because if it turns out that it's a son that when she's pregnant, she gives birth to a boy, Lo Adi Mahai Dekai, right? He's not better than any of the boys that are alive. We just said that the boys don't get anything, go work in a field, right? The servants are not yours, right? It belongs to the girls. So therefore, when the girls were alive, and Ibas, and if there's a girl, right? So Mayachla, because it's a so if we say it's a girl, so we say no, that which the takana we made, right, that the girls can go ahead and get the estate, the meager estate, and sell it for their sustenance and for their support, right? That's only takana was only made by live children. It wasn't made by for a fetus. So therefore, the fetus doesn't inherit any the avadim right now. So therefore, even if she gives birth to a girl, this girl is not a partner, and the others because the takana was not said on a fetus, it was only said on live female children. So Gemara says, so what are we talking about over here, right? So we're talking about Nechasim. So Amos Seifa, let's take a look at Seifa. It says Shema Yimatze Ha'uber Zachar Vein Labaras Makam Ben Klum. The Seifa says the Farish, right, that perhaps she's going to give birth if there's only girls, right, and she gives birth to a boy. It turns out the girls never own the avadim, and only the fetus does because it's a boy. So obviously the boy is inheriting. If the boy is inheriting, we must be talking about a big estate, not a meager estate. Because if it was a meager estate, it would go to the girls. So the Seifa says, so Gemara says, what do you mean if we're talking about a meager estate, it should belong only to the girls? So Gemara answers, no, so he says, no, the Seifa is referring to where there's a larger estate, and therefore we'll go to the boys, the Chasim Muatim, the Benas, fine. We still got. And we say over there that if there's a meager estate, it only goes to the daughters, right? Right? So we say over there that if someone went and they sold, right? So the sale is good, even if there was the boys. So you see over here that it doesn't mean it belongs only to the girls. Really, it's like whoever needs it, and the first come, first serve, and they sell it because it's a meager estate, then it belongs to them. So how could you say it only belongs to the daughters, right? And the sons have no chelik in it, right? If the 6-year-old goes ahead and arranges for something to be sold for his parnasa, he can do it. Vela my bas, rather what you can say, diktani, right, doesn't mean bas. It means aim. It means the mother, right? If the mother is alive, right, then they can go ahead and eat, right? The Tani aims. If that's the case, right? So it's referring to the mother, and therefore the mother is referring to the avdei malug, which belonged to her, since she could eat, they could eat, right? So if that's the case, that's Rabbi Yosi. So ihachi hana Rabbi Yosi. So Rabbi Shlomo Rabbi Yosi Ketani La. No, it was all that Rabbi Shlomo Rabbi Yosi Ketani La. And therefore, there was no argument, right? He is the same as Rabbi Yosi, and therefore he holds that in this case, if the mother, only the nichse, the avdei malug can go ahead and eat because they belong to the mother, and therefore she's eating, they're eating. But if it's the other side, if it's indeed right that we're referring to the nichse, the avdei sona barzel, then they cannot eat. Fine. Now you mission. Ha'uber v'hayavam v'erusin v'cheresh v'tesha v'yemechad. So these 5 categories: an uber, right, a fetus, a yavam, will explain each case, and the Gemara will explain each case, and engagement, a deaf mute, and someone, a child who was 9 in one day. Poislin v'loy machlin. The worst of both worlds. They passel. In other words, if she's a bas kohen and she goes out and marries a Yisrael, and then he dies, so normally bas kohen will go back to her father's house. She's married for a week, and then nothing happens. She goes back to her father's house and continue to eat truma, even though she was married for a week. But if she was left pregnant, right, to a Yisrael, or if she had to do a yibum, there was a yavam waiting, right? There was a yibum, or if she was only engaged to a Yisrael, right, or betrothed, right, or if he was a deaf mute, was the kohen, right, or if he was 9 years old, was Sunsi in the Gemara, then it passes her, she can no longer eat, right? Because even though she comes from her father's house, who is a kohen, and also not only that, if it's the opposite, right? Let's say she was a Yisrael and it was to a kohen, they don't acquire her enough to allow her to eat truma, right? Just an engagement, or if he was a yavam, or if he was an uber, right? Or if it was just a fetus, that's not a born child. Therefore, none of these cases would allow her to go ahead and eat. And we say also not only suffix shu ben teisha v'yom echad suffix sheno. There's a suffix whether he's 9, a little bit older or not, right? So we say it's a suffix, and also suffix hevi saras v'suffix shalevi. Or if he got engaged, wasn't sure that whether he was 13, he had showed physical signs of maturity, then both those cases also will not qualify her to go ahead and eat. The Gemara will explain that case, because even if suffix, we go l'chumra and don't allow her to eat truma, or it prevents her from going back to her father's house and eating truma. Now, nafal abayis alav dial bas achiv. So here's the case. You have a man married his niece. All right, we use a little tchotchkes. A guy married his brother's daughter. Okay, his brother's daughter. Now, and he has 2 wives. He has a separate second wife. Okay. Now the married couple.
No, it's Sarah. Yes, Sarah to the niece.
She's right. So he has 2 wives. One is his niece, and one is a regular other woman. Now they go away, right? And a building. They go ahead and nafal abayis alav, and they both die. No. Sorry. The husband and his niece both die. Now. It's a question of nafal abayis alav yal bas achiv. The vows that fell on him, and also on his niece, who he's married to. We don't know who died first. Now remember, if the niece died first, okay, so she's dead. Now the other wife has 0 co-wives, and then he died a minute later, so she falls to yibum to her husband's brother. There's no issue of arai. Is there? Yibum. If the husband died first, he leaves over 2 wives, one of which is the daughter to the Yavam, and therefore her tzara is pater, completely pater. So in this case, Veina de Ezeman Meis Rishon, Tzarasa Chalesa Misavemis. He has Chalitza out of suffix. Right. Well, the other one doesn't. The tzara does, right? Because that was dead. Right. Yeah. Because it could have been her co-wife, and the co-wife was an heir. Right.
But if he's the only brother,
Right.
and she didn't die.
No, we're talking about she died now. We're talking about she had to die. Fine. Zok the Gemara.
There's only one other brother.
Yes. Right. Now, Zok the Gemara, the Gemara, Uber. So we say the fetus. So Ibas Kon Yisrael. So we say, why does a fetus not feed and also prevents feeding? So Ibas Kon, so we're going to go to both cases. Ibas Kohen Yisrael. If it was a girl who was a Kohenes who married Israel, he pasala, right? So why does he pasal her? Because the pasuk says, right? The pasuk says a bas Kohen, when she's married to another man and he dies, she goes back to her father's house like her youth, and she'd eat truma, right? So he said, Ibas Kohen Yisrael, he pasala bin because the pasuk has been in her youth. Praslum Aberis, that was someone who was pregnant. So since she's pregnant, she can't go back to her father who's a Kohen's house and eat truma because she's pregnant. If she was not pregnant, she can go back, but pregnant you can't. And eat Bas Yisrael the Kohen. And if we're talking about that she was a Bas Yisrael and she was pregnant by her husband, her deceased husband who was a Kohen, so it says he lo machil, so eat Bas Yisrael the Kohen, he lo machil, la, you lo machil. So he says, no, if it's a case of only when one is born, that allows his mother to eat truma on his behalf, because the child is a Kohen, then his mother can go ahead and eat. But when he's not born, then he can't allow his mother to eat on his behalf. He's only a fetus. And then we said about Yavam. If she formed Yibum, so Bas Kohen Yisrael, if it was a Bas Kohen Yisrael, he passes love. Says she returns to her father's house. Probably Shemeres Yavam, but only it says she returns to her father's house, which would exclude from there a Shemeres Yavam. So if she's a Bas Kohen and she wants to go back to her father's house and eat truma, but she can't because she still has this Zika, right, with this with the Yavam. And he Bas Yisrael the Kohen. If it was a Bas Yisrael and it was the Yavam was a Kohen, says Hila Machilah. Can't feed him. Why? Because only says if you acquire somebody, not your brother's acquisition. So since the brother acquired her only through his power, but he's no longer alive, so she can't go ahead and eat truma on behalf of the yavam. Or if she gets engaged, also he says if it's a bas kohen, it's engaged to Yisrael, he passes up. Right, then so Ibas Kohen Yisrael he passes her why to the page to Kanya Behavio because he acquired her. The Yisrael is engaged to her, he's betrothed her, and therefore she's no longer a Kohenes or a fully part of Kohenes.
Because she can't eat her father, and she's not living.
Right, yeah, and you're right. If Bas Yisrael, and if she's a Bas Yisrael, a Kohen, she's a Kohen, and says, "Oh, I'm engaged to a Kohen, go ahead eat." If that's the case, then because of Ula, because Ula has a Gzeira, that if she's just to engage to a Kohen, we're worried that if she's eating Truma, she's going to take it back to her father's house where she's living, and then her father and brothers who are Yisraelim will eat from her Truma, and therefore Ula says, no, do not go ahead and eat. All right, we'll stop here. Let's go ahead, everybody. Yeah, can you take him?